Hello, apes, and welcome to screencast number 8 in the Chapter 3 series. And I looked, we're on slide 48, and we've got to go to like 80. So we've got a lot more to go. I was hoping we were getting to the end of this chapter. I had a terrible, frightening thing happen, and the screencast-o-matic froze on me and wouldn't allow me to record. And I thought, oh no, I broke it, and what was I going to do? And I know you were all probably cheering, yay, 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 but I got it to work again, so here we are. We were talking about populations, and now we are going to look at distribution. And I know we talked about population density. Distribution is a little bit different because it looks at, instead of how many we have in an area, how are they dispersed? So it looks more at the spatial arrangement. And we're going to be looking at pictures on the next screen. And we're going to see three different things. We're going to see random population distribution, which this is just kind of haphazardly everywhere around where the individuals are located. And there isn't any particular type pattern to it or grid or any rhyme or reason, but they're just there. And then we're going to look at the uniform population distribution. And this is where we're going to see that individuals are going to be evenly distributed throughout, evenly spaced. And that's going to be that way because we're going to see territoriality happening. This is big among chimps. They have a certain territory that they're in. And then competition is another reason why we would see that uniform distribution. And then we're going to look at clumped. And clumped is where organisms are going to be found very close to other members of a population. Clumped is the one that's most common in nature because they tend to cluster more around the resources that they need. And because a lot of times the organisms that are in these communities, it helps them kind of defend each other. So it's a mutual type of defense mechanism to be clumped. So let's take a look at those pictures. And in the top one, the way that we see these trees, isn't that a beautiful fall picture? I love the fall, my favorite time of year. We're seeing that there's really no particular pattern that, especially if you're looking for the green trees in here, they're just randomly around. And then when we take a look at uniform, they have the penguins here, and you can see that there's a definite spacing, a uniform spacing that is between them. And then when we consider clumped, think about schools of fish. I think of Finding Nemo, and when they're asking the fish how to get to the East Australian current, and they clump up into the shapes and symbols and the arrows and that. So that's what these individuals are going to do in the way that they're distributed throughout. One of the things that population ecologists are also going to do is they're going to look at the age structure, and they're going to look at the sex ratio as well with this. We're going to see a TED Ed video on this in class that's really going to help back this up a little bit for you and give you some nice visuals. But the sex ratio is just the proportion of males to females. And when we look at species that are monogamous, where it's one male to one female, we tend to see a 1-to-1 ratio, and that really helps to maximize the population growth. But as we know, population species are not monogamous, and because of that, the ratios are going to vary. So it's summertime when I'm making this, and you've probably gone outside, and at nighttime you can hear the tree frogs, and they're probably ribbiting. And if you had biology with me and you dissected a frog, you know that the male frogs are the frogs that are the ones that croak. Females don't. And that's their way, that's their mating call. That's the way that they call the females over. So one night they have one female, another night they have another female, and you get these large numbers of frogs that will be produced from that. So we're going to see different ratios with that. Okay, so let's talk about age distribution. And as I said, we're going to hopefully be seeing a video on age structure and age distribution. But these would be special diagrams or pyramids that are going to show the age and structure of populations. They give the idea of the relative number of individuals that are in each age group of a population. So when we do this diagram, like if we were looking at the population of Rwanda, there would be a higher population of individuals between the age of 0 to 4. So at the pyramid, it would be a broader base, and then it would narrow up, and it would go up to where the point would be maybe individuals, less individuals of the ages of around 70 years old, like say 65 to 70. So it would show that as far as children are concerned, there's going to be a lot more young people, like between the ages of 0 and 15, and then after that, the age numbers are going to start to drastically decline. And it's also going to show you in that age distribution how many males are in that population of those ages and how many females are in that population. And what you'll notice in Rwanda is because of the large number of children that a woman will have when they reach the older ages, there's less females in that population than there are males, because having children is such a strain to the female body, and they're having large numbers. So we can use this within all different species to show whether the population is growing, and we can get a tendency, and when we watch this TED Ed, it's going to give a clearer picture of this, but we can see how that population is going to grow, if it's going to be exponential, if it's going to decline, and we can look at that. We can also get an idea about the older individuals and understand more about those older individuals within that group. So one of the things that you're going to be doing this year is going to be making a survivorship curve. Hopefully you've been going to went to a cemetery and collected the necessary information, and you're going to work in groups, and you needed a large number of information, and that's why each one of you had to do 100 in one group and 100 in another group, so that you have around 300 to 400 bits of information. And survivorship curves are going to be graphs that are going to show the likelihood of death and how that likelihood of death within different types are going to vary with age. So there's 3 type ranges. There's the type 1, type 2, and type 3. And type 1 has a higher death rate at older ages. So that enables the organisms to be able to grow to a ripe old age before they die. So humans are a good example of this, and typically larger animals have the larger lengths of time that they survive. Type 2 is going to be the same death rate at all ages, so it's steady. And this is going to affect medium-sized animals, and it will include some birds. That'll be part of this. And then type 3 is going to be the higher death rate, and that means that organisms are going to die at young ages. So lightning bugs, do you know lightning bugs only live a week? So we're going to see a very high death rate with that. They live most of their time as larvae under the soil, but when they hatch out, they only live for about a week. So small animals and plants are going to be the examples in these cases. So here is the survivorship curve that we're talking about, and we can see, where's my little arrow? We're going to see that, we get all of these survivors that are able to live to a ripe old age before they start to die, so humans fit that. Here's the type 2 that's steady, and then here is where we look at like frogs that don't have a very long life cycle, and tadpoles. A lot of tadpoles die at a young age. They don't survive. So those are our survivorship curves that ecologists will try to understand within the populations. They will look at how the populations grow and shrink, or whether they remain stable based on natality, which is the number of births within that particular population. So that's the birth rate, or mortality, which is the death rate within that population. How many deaths are they going to have? They're also going to look at immigration and emigration, and they're going to see how many individuals are actually moving into the population and how many individuals are moving out of the population. So immigration is the arrival from outside, and emigration, is the departure of individuals from a population. So that's going to have an effect on the population growth that we're going to see. When we consider births and immigrations and knowing that they add individuals, we can understand how that population is going to grow and increase in size. When we look at deaths or emigration, that's going to remove the individuals. So when we understand that rate, we can understand how that's going to affect that population. We're also going to consider what we call a crude birth rate or crude death rate. And this is just roughly the number of births or the number of deaths that we have per at 1,000 individuals every year. So we're looking at a group of 1,000 individuals, and how many out of those 1,000 individuals are going to be giving birth. How many of those individuals out of 1,000 are going to be dying. Okay, so these are other ways that we can look at population growth. So you may be asking, because you're all so bright, so Mrs. Saunders, how do we tell what the natural rate of population increase is? A very easy mathematical formula. We're going to take the crude birth rate, we're going to subtract it from the crude death rate, and that's going to give us the idea of whether the population is going to increase or decrease. And we know that there's other factors that can affect the change of populations. The availability of resources is one of those. Disease is another. So those are some of the things that can affect the birth rate and the death rate. We also see that underdeveloped countries tend to have a higher birth rate as well as a higher death rate, and that's something that we're gonna talk about. We're running out of time in this screencast. We'll talk about population growth in the next one.